In the midst of a perilous mission, a police officer sustains injuries and calls out for assistance. A K-9 officer responds to the call, rescuing him and forming a lifelong bond as partners in duty. Yet, the events that unfold in the years to come will weigh heavily on your heart. Officer Michael Desta chased the burglar as far into the woods as they could go. When they reached a dead end, he asked the burglar to turn around slowly. His heart was beating out of his chest as he realized that his gun had fallen off while he was running. What was he going to do? Thankfully, he did not see any weapons on the man, so he hoped to settle this quickly and without injuries. But the man seemed to notice that Mike had no gun on him. In a swift movement, he brought out what looked like a weapon and plunged towards the officer. He hit Mike multiple times before the cop could even react, then took off. Pain shot through Mike's entire body. The man had hit him with a knife. Most wounds were superficial, but the cut on his leg was deep enough to prevent him from running after the suspect. If he were to be honest, Mike felt too weak to even stand, let alone give chase. His leg gave out a minute later, and he found himself sprawled on the forest floor. He tried reaching out with his radio, but the signal was cut off. He was too deep into the woods. He knew he needed to find a way to get his fellow officers to his location, but he didn't know what to do. He could only scream at the top of his lungs, hoping that someone would hear him. If only Alfredo had been with him, he thought as he cried. He could have dispatched him to fetch one of his colleagues. This wasn't the first time that day he was thinking about his partner. When he had woken up that morning to a beautiful sunny day in Middletown, the first thought that had popped into his head was this would have been a perfect day to go on a stroll with Alfredo. But Alfredo was no more. His K-9 partner had been killed in a shootout while they were chasing suspected drug dealers a while back. The worst part of it was that he had been the one who had found the lifeless, bloody body of his partner, and he was yet to get over the memory. It had been weeks since Mike returned to work, but he was still sad. He had to return without his partner. He almost felt like a police officer without a gun. But he had to. He had been given enough time to grieve his loss, and now it was time for him to resume work and choose a new partner. Weeks ago, new police dogs had arrived at his department, trained and ready. The only thing needed was a compatible handler, and they would be clear to go on missions. Mike was not exactly excited to get a new partner because he still missed Alfredo, but it was a duty he had to fulfill. To pick his new partner, he had to decide what specific purpose he needed the K-9 officer for. This purpose could be detection of drugs, explosives, or accelerants, patrol tracking, or protection. Alfredo served dual purposes while they worked together as a protector and detector, so he knew exactly what he wanted in a partner. But still, he delayed his choice and kept giving excuses to the trainers anytime he was asked why he had not yet picked a partner. Mike's excuse was always, "I don't know what purpose he should serve yet. I've not decided," even though that was a lie. He had to pick a partner as soon as possible. He was the only one in the department currently without one. But he did not mind, he was still not ready to choose. He felt like he would be betraying Alfredo's memory. That day, a call came in for officers to be dispatched to an area where burglars had been spotted. The report stated that the criminals broke into a home armed and left 2 people badly injured. It also stated that the burglars fled from the scene almost immediately as they realized police patrols had been dispatched. Mike didn't usually go for these types of missions, but he went that day so he could have the perfect excuse to stay away from the K-9 unit. So he went on patrol in the area. He reasoned that the burglars could not have gone that far, as the report had come in almost immediately after they had left the house. Some witnesses had also reported a shutdown around the area, which meant that they still must be close by. The occupants of the house had described the burglars, so the only thing left was to spot them and arrest them. Mike was on the lookout. He had been assigned to check the identities of anyone leaving the area. While he was doing that, he noticed someone acting suspiciously. The person had a face mask on and was walking awkwardly, like he was trying not to be noticed. These were the telltale signs of someone who had something to hide. So, Mike called out to him, "Excuse me, sir," but there was no reply. He called out some more, but still no reply. He walked closer to him, and as he approached him, Mike recognized him as one of the burglars. Upon realizing that he had been recognized, the burglar took off and Mike chased after him, calling for backup while he ran. Thankfully, backup arrived straight away. His colleagues were trying to figure out where he could have gone and sent their own dogs searching for his scent. They found his gun on the road to the woods, which motivated them to keep looking. Nearby patrols were sent out to find Mike, But it wasn't a human officer who first stumbled upon him. Mike was found by a K-9 officer who had strayed away from the restricted area. A while after he had started the chase, he had followed Mike closely but had lost him for a while. Then he had picked up on the scent and sounds of his crying. The name of this K-9 officer was Hunter, like the good dog and police officer he was. He alerted the other cops by barking continuously and then leading them into the woods until they found Mike. Mike was rushed to the hospital, where he lost consciousness while the doctor disinfected and stitched his wounds. While he was unconscious, Hunter never left the room. The dog stayed there until Mike opened his eyes and gave a happy bark when he stirred awake. After Mike was discharged and resumed work, he went looking for Hunter, and they were both ecstatic to meet each other again. He had come to thank the canine officer who saved his life, but when he looked at him that day, he saw more than his savior. He saw a partner, a friend, a sidekick, and Hunter seemed to see the same thing too. So, Mike finally decided who his new partner was going to be. From that moment on, Hunter and he trained together every day. Mike took Hunter everywhere he went. He even took him home and introduced him to his family. Anywhere Mike was, Hunter was nearby. No one could separate them from each other. They quickly became one of the best duos the department had ever seen. After their first harrowing encounter in 2007, they started their patrol together that same year and went on together for a long time. Their daily routine included training, patrols, search and rescue, detection of drugs, firearms or explosives, and protection of properties and people. Within a few years, Hunter had helped officers in several drug busts and was publicly commended for his help in locating an elderly woman with dementia who had wandered away from her home at night. Mike and Hunter were simply unstoppable together. 10 years later, Hunter had become more than just a K-9 officer to Mike. They had been on numerous adventures and missions together, and the officer looked forward to more. On one fateful day, the duo was assigned to an area where drug dealers were suspected to be present. So their job was to go and check if any illicit activity was taking place in the area, and, if it was, to apprehend the culprits. Mike was ready for the day, but he did not find Hunter waiting at the usual spot he stood when it was time to leave for missions. The officer thought it was strange. He looked around for the dog and found him in his bed, awake but unresponsive. He also noticed that Hunter had not eaten the day before. He had been so tired when he had finally come home after a 12-hour shift that he hadn't taken note of his dog's lack of appetite. Mike assumed Hunter was just tired, as the week had been stressful, so he let him sleep in and went to work. When he got back home that day, Hunter did not greet him at the door as usual, which was even stranger. Mike went over to his bed and saw him in the same spot and position he had left him in the morning. The sight terrified him, and he rushed him to the vet. After examination, they told him that Hunter was just stressed and gave him pills to stimulate his appetite. But after a week, nothing had changed and Hunter seemed even worse for wear. He had lost a lot of weight. His breathing sounded labored. He always seemed tired and in pain and was restless all the time. Mike quickly rushed back to the vet and told them all he had noticed in the past few days. They ran some tests, and finally, the officer was told what was wrong with his best friend. Unfortunately, it was devastating news. Mike was told that Hunter had aggressive liver cancer and that no amount of treatment could ever cure him. Despite being devastated themselves, the vets recommended that Hunter be euthanized. Mike felt like his worst nightmare was coming back to haunt him over and over again. First Alfredo, now Hunter. He wondered how this had happened. Things were fine. Everything had been going well, so how was this possible? Mike was devastated at the thought of losing his partner for the second time. He thought of all the memories he and Hunter had made together, all the missions they had been assigned to, all the walks they had taken in the park. He tried to negotiate with the vets, but they told him there was no other way to help Hunter. He thought of not following the vets' orders, but he could not bear the thought of seeing Hunter in pain every moment of his life. So, eventually, he decided to just go along with it. It was the worst decision Mike had to make in his life. He could barely eat or sleep that night. His life had changed in a moment, and he could not do anything about it. Hunter stayed by his side all through the night. He seemed to notice that something was wrong with his human and tried to comfort him, not knowing that this would be his last mission. In turn, Mike watched over Hunter all night and tried to ease the pain he was feeling, but it was simply impossible. 2 days later, members of the Connecticut Police Department in the city of Middletown stood in line to bid farewell to K-9 Officer Hunter as Officer Michael Desta cradled him in his arms on his final trip to the vet to be euthanized. The members of the department stood side by side while Mike and his beloved dog walked through in the middle and gave Officer Hunter his final salute. It was the second worst day of Mike's life. The first had been Alfredo's death. Losing a partner is the worst thing that can happen to an officer, considering the bonds formed based on loyalty and training, and for Mike, this was already the second time. The bond between him and Hunter had taken shape from the first time they were paired and had endured until the last time they spent together. That morning, Mike told himself that he was not going to cry in front of Hunter. He wanted to be strong for his best friend, but he could not. He was overwhelmed with so many emotions that he cried all his tears while holding his partner in his arms. His fellow officers cried with him, turning that sad occasion into a memorable moment for everybody. Mike gave Hunter as many kisses as he could to say goodbye for the last time before he handed Hunter over to the vet to do what they had to. Mike was going to need another break to process the loss of his partner and friend. Thankfully, the department understood his pain and let him grieve without forcing him to select another partner. Hunter's value to the department was well documented. He was going to be missed by everyone on the force, but most especially by Mike and his family. What an emotional conclusion. Would it be difficult for you to choose another canine partner if yours passed away while on duty? Did the officer's final goodbye to Hunter bring tears to your eyes? We value your insights, so please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.